The wind had been howling against the windshield for hours, turning the world into a smear of white and gray. Elias Ward hadn't seen another car since sunrise, and that was a full day ago, if you could still call it sunrise this far north. The light came and went like a dying heartbeat. He drove anyway, clutching the steering wheel with raw hands, the dashboard clock blinking 2:14 a.m., then 0:30, then 2:14 again. The radio had stopped working somewhere after anchorage, and now the only sound was the endless storm and the faint rattle of a whiskey bottle rolling under the passenger seat. Once that bottle would have been empty by now, but Elias had been dry for 78 days. He kept count. The thought of the number made him smile bitterly. 78 days since his wife left. 78 days since his court hearing. 78 days since he stopped running from everything except himself. He was heading north because there was nowhere else left to go. Somewhere beyond the Arctic Circle there was said to be a light station, as the truck driver at the diner had called it. A place that paid cash, asked no questions, and always needed a man who knew how to keep a generator alive through the long polar night. When Elias reached the final stretch of road, the storm broke open above him. Snow fell in heavy sheets, and the headlights cut through it like knives through milk. His breath fogged the windshield from the inside as he pulled up to a rusted metal sign half buried in frost. The letters had been scraped almost clean by years of wind, but he could make out one word: station. He laughed under his breath. That was all he needed. A place with no address, no questions, no past. He parked, grabbed his duffel, and stepped into the freezing dark. The air felt solid, like glass pressing against his lungs. There was no sound, except the wind shifting over the snow. Then in the distance, a row of lights blinked, tall poles stabbing up from the ice, stretching toward a long, low building. Elias started walking toward them. Each step crunched like breaking bones underfoot. When he reached the first pole, he saw it clearly, a powerful halogen bulb, its light trembling through the storm. Another bulb glowed 20 yards away, and another, forming a perfect ring of light around the building. A figure waited by the nearest door. Broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy parka face hidden by the hood. "You must be Ward," the man said when Elias approached. His voice was low, deep-edged with weariness. "Jonas Hale. I run this place." Elias nodded, too numb to speak. Jonas looked him over, then motioned him inside. "Rule's simple," he said, punching a code into the keypad by the door. "Keep the power steady. Keep the lights on. Always. That's how we stay alive out here." Inside, the air was stale and metallic. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their buzz mixing with the soft vibration of engines somewhere deep within the walls. Jonas handed him a pair of gloves and a thick jacket lined with fur. "You'll need that," he said. "We start early. Night shift runs from now until the sun comes back." Elias frowned. "How long's that?" Jonas looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. 67 days, give or take." He turned and started walking down a narrow hallway lined with locked doors. "You'll meet the others in the morning. 2 more on crew, Mara and Keller. They'll show you how things run." Elias followed the sound of their boots echoing through the empty corridor. The deeper they went, the more the hum of electricity filled the air. Jonas stopped beside a window set into the outer wall. Outside, the ring of floodlights blazed against the black snow. Beyond them was nothing. No stars, no sky, no horizon. Only darkness. "You'll get used to it," Jonas said quietly. The dark. The silence. The feeling that something's watching from just outside the light. Elias forced a laugh. "You mean wildlife?" Jonas didn't answer. He kept staring at the black void beyond the glass. "Whatever you do," he said finally, "don't let the lights go out. Not for a second." Elias looked out again, following the trail of lamps curving away into the distance. Their glow was the only thing keeping the building from dissolving into the night. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and whispered almost to himself, "I just came here to disappear." Jonas turned toward him. "Then you came to the right place." The first few days passed in a blur of white noise and electric hum. The station ran on a rhythm all its own 12-hour shifts, 6 hours of sleep, and the rest spent trying not to lose your mind in the dark. The polar night wasn't just absence of sunlight. It was weight. It pressed against the windows, seeped through the walls, filled every breath with static. Elias had worked night shifts before, but this was different. Out here, the world didn't turn anymore. Time just hung suspended, waiting for something to happen. Jonas showed him the power room on his second day. It was a long, narrow space filled with humming panels and thick cables crawling across the floor like veins. "Each section of light around the perimeter runs through here," Jonas said, pointing to a set of labeled breakers. "Every 12 hours we check for power loss or voltage drop. Anything flickers, we fix it immediately. No delays." Elias nodded, glancing up at the flickering bulbs overhead. "What happens if we don't?" Jonas looked at him for a long moment before answering. "You'll hear them first. Then you won't." Elias waited for a grin, a hint that Jonas was joking. There was none. Later that night, while he was reviewing system logs in the control room, he met Mara. She was standing by the window, cigarette glowing faintly between her fingers, her reflection trembling in the glass. She didn't turn when he walked in. "You're the new guy," she said flatly. "Elias Ward." "That's me," he replied. "You're Mara." She nodded, exhaling smoke that coiled against the window like ghostly breath. "Jonas tells me you know generators. That's good. You'll need it." Elias glanced at the monitor's rows of camera feeds, showing the endless snow, the ring of lights stretching into blackness. Everything looked calm, still. "What exactly are we keeping the lights on for?" he asked. Mara stubbed out her cigarette and finally faced him. Her eyes looked hollow, sleepless. "You'll see." That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The hum of electricity pulsed through the walls like a heartbeat. He thought he heard footsteps in the hallway outside his room, slow and dragging. When he opened the door, there was nothing but the low flicker of emergency lighting. He told himself it was just the building settling. Old metal and cold air. Nothing else. On the 5th day, Jonas assigned him his first solo maintenance run. Elias suited up, grabbed a portable lamp and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a slap, so sharp it made his teeth ache. His breath froze in the air as he moved between the poles of light. The snow underfoot looked almost blue under the halogen glow. For the first time, he noticed how each beam of light seemed to carve out a perfect circle of safety, and how absolute the darkness was beyond those circles. Halfway through his inspection, the radio on his shoulder crackled. A voice whispered through static, "Elias, can you hear me?" It was Mara's voice, faint but clear. "Yeah," he said. "I'm here." "Don't go past the 4th pole," she said. "Not tonight." "Why not silence?" Then a faint scraping sound through the radio, like something dragging against metal. "Because the light doesn't reach that far anymore." He looked ahead. The 5th light stood flickering in the distance, its beam stuttering like a dying pulse. For a moment, he thought he saw movement between the poles, something tall and bent, crossing through the shadows. Then the bulb steadied, and whatever he'd seen was gone. When he got back inside, Jonas was waiting. You didn't go past the fourth pole, did you? Elias shook his head. No. Mara told me not to. Jonas's jaw tightened. Good. Don't. Ever. He didn't explain, and Elias didn't ask. But that night he dreamt of lights flickering out, one by one, and of shapes crawling into the glow as each bulb died. On the seventh day, the station's radio woke him again. It clicked on by itself at 03:03 a.m. The speakers hissed with static before a man's voice came through a slow, distorted whisper. The light remembers. It burns. It binds. Elias sat up, heart pounding. Who is this? No answer, just breathing. Wet, shallow breathing close to the mic. Then faintly, under the hiss, he heard another voice, a woman's scream cut off mid-breath. The radio died. He stumbled out of bed and ran to the control room. Mara was already there, staring at the window. You heard it too, she said, without looking at him. Who was that? Jonas. Mara shook her head slowly. That wasn't Jonas. That was Dr. Keller. The one who ran this place before us. Elias blinked. Before us? I thought. There was another team, she interrupted. 5 years ago, Keller was in charge. They never left. Outside the glass, the ring of light hummed faintly. Snow drifted past in slow, endless waves. Elias leaned closer to the window, squinting into the dark. For a moment, just beyond the furthest light, he saw movement, something tall and thin, standing still against the horizon. Then the bulb nearest it flickered once, twice, and went out. The darkness swallowed everything beyond that point. By the time the third week came, the storm had settled into something worse than violence. It had become a silence so deep it swallowed every sound. The endless dark pressed against the station windows like a living thing, and even Jonas began to look older, his eyes sunk back in his skull. Elias marked the days by his heartbeat, by the pulse of the generators, by the sound of the lights buzzing overhead. On the 21st night, the hum faltered. It was small at first, a flicker, a dip in the power that made the bulbs quiver like frightened eyes. Elias noticed it while checking the voltage readouts in the control room. The meters dropped for less than a second, then climbed again. He radioed Jonas immediately. Power surge. East sector, Elias said. Could be ice buildup on the lines. Jonas's voice came back through static. We'll have to go out there. Bring the spare cable. Mara looked up from her console. It's not the ice, she whispered. Not this time. Jonas ignored her. Ward, get your gear. Move. Elias followed him through the corridor toward the outer door. Mara's voice trailed behind them, barely audible. Don't let the dark touch you. Outside, the wind was a frozen scream. The two men trudged through knee-deep snow toward the edge of the light ring. Each step was agony. The cold burned through their boots, clawed at their lungs. The lights above hissed and flickered their beams, fighting to pierce the endless black. They reached the generator panel at the far side of the compound. Jonas crouched beside it, wiping frost from the controls. It's not ice, he muttered, confirming what Mara had said. The connection's clean. Something pulled the cable loose. Elias stared at the torn end of the line. The metal clamp was bent, not corroded. Bent like it had been pried apart by hands or claws. Jonas's flashlight cut across the snow, and for a heartbeat, the beam caught something moving beyond the light ring. Something pale and wrong. Did you see? That Elias whispered. Jonas didn't answer. His breathing had changed faster, heavier. Keep your eyes on the light, he said. Don't look out there. They move when you do. Elias swallowed hard and bent to reattach the cable. His gloves slipped against the frozen metal. Behind him, the darkness rippled. He could hear it, something shifting in the snow, circling. His head screamed to turn to look, but he kept his gaze locked on the flickering bulb overhead. Then Jonas's flashlight beam went out. The world fell away in an instant. The cold became teeth on his skin. He fumbled for his own lamp fingers' numb breath, coming in gasps. A whisper crawled through the dark close to his ear. It wasn't words. It was the sound of something wet and hungry. "Jonas," he shouted. No reply, only the crunch of snow and the heavy drag of something being pulled away. Elias's flashlight finally flared to life. Its cone of light sliced through the dark, just in time for him to see a trail of red in the snow leading into the black. Jonas was gone. Elias ran. He didn't think, didn't breathe, just ran. The radio crackled against his chest. Mara's voice came through, urgent and broken. "Elias, get back inside. Now." He burst through the door, slammed it behind him, and collapsed against the wall. His breath fogged the air in frantic bursts. The lights above flickered again as if reacting to his fear. Mara was already there, her face pale under the harsh fluorescence. "Where's Jonas?" Elias shook his head. Something took him. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering something under her breath. A prayer or a curse, he couldn't tell. When she looked back at him, her voice was calm but trembling. "They're awake now." Before he could ask, the power cut out completely. The entire station fell into darkness. The emergency lights sputtered, then died. Elias grabbed the radio. "Control, come in, Keller, Jonas, anyone. Only static." Then, under the hiss, that same voice from nights before, a whisper, too close, too human. The light remembers. Something thumped against the outer door. Once, twice, then a scraping sound, metal against metal, slow and deliberate. Mara backed away from the door. "They can't come inside," she said quickly. "Not while the circuits are dead. They won't see us if the light isn't there." Elias stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "They're outside. We need light. We need—" The door buckled inward with a deafening crack. He fell silent. Both of them stood frozen, watching as the metal warped, bending under invisible pressure. Then everything stopped. The silence returned, thick and heavy. Mara whispered, "It's learning." The emergency generator clicked once, then twice, and a single light bulb flickered to life at the end of the corridor. For the briefest second, Elias saw it, tall, pale spine, arched backward, fingers too long, skin stretched thin like paper. Its mouth opened wider than human, the jaw unhinged, and the light went out again. In the dark, something whispered his name. The darkness inside the station had weight now. It pressed against the walls, it breathed in the corridors. Elias could feel it sliding across his skin like cold water. He and Mara stood in the faint glow of the dying emergency light, both of them shaking, but trying not to move, not to make a sound. The generator room door rattled once, then fell still. Mara raised a trembling finger to her lips. "They don't see," she whispered. "They sense. Heat, movement, sound. If you move, they move." Elias's pulse thundered in his ears. The thing outside had whispered his name. It knew him. He didn't understand how. "What are they?" he breathed. Mara didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the corridor. "The dark," she said quietly. "That's what Keller called them. The dark made alive. They're older than the ice." A metallic creak echoed through the air ducts above them. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Elias looked up, eyes wide. "They're inside." "Stay still," Mara hissed. Something slithered through the vent. The metal bent under its weight. Then a pale hand, thin, jointed wrong, pushed through the grate, followed by another. The thing unfolded itself from the duct limbs scraping along the wall. It dropped soundlessly onto the floor just 10 feet from them. Its skin shimmered faintly under the dying red light, translucent veins black and pulsing. Elias felt his throat tighten. His instincts screamed to run, but his body refused to move. The creature tilted its head toward him, sniffing the air. Then its jaw cracked open, and the faintest whisper escaped, a perfect imitation of his own voice. "Elias!" He stumbled backward, heart exploding in his chest. The thing lunged. Mara fired. The muzzle flash seared the darkness, the blast echoing through the hallway. The creature shrieked a sound that wasn't meant for human ears and collapsed into the shadows. For a moment, the corridor filled with smoke and the smell of burning flesh. Elias dropped beside Mara, who was reloading her sidearm with trembling hands. "What the hell was that?" She swallowed. "They mimic. They learn your voice, your memories." "How?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled him toward the stairwell that led down to the generator bay. "If we don't restart the main power, the outer lights will never come back on. And if that happens, this place becomes theirs." They descended into the belly of the station, their flashlights trembling across rusted steel and frost-coated walls. Every sound, the crunch of boots, the click of metal, seemed too loud. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The generator bay looked like something out of another century, massive turbines coated in ice cables twisting into the floor. The emergency lights flickered in slow red pulses, casting long shadows that moved when they didn't. Elias approached the main control panel. "If I reconnect the intake line and reset the coolant valve, the ignition sequence should..." Mara grabbed his arm. "Wait!" He turned. "What?" She stared past him, eyes wide with horror. "They're here!" He spun around. The far end of the generator bay was crawling with movement shapes, pulling themselves out of the dark. Dozens of them. Their bodies writhed like they'd forgotten how to be human, their mouths stretching open in soundless screams. "Keep them back!" Elias shouted, slamming his hand down on the ignition switch. The turbines coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Blue light flickered across the walls as the system rebooted. The creatures shrieked and fell back, retreating toward the corners where the shadows still clung. Elias turned another lever, and the floodlights above blazed to full strength. The bay filled with blinding white. The things convulsed and collapsed, their skin blistering under the light. Mara gasped, "You did it!" But before Elias could respond, the loudspeaker above crackled to life. A voice, Jonas's voice, filled the room. "Good work, Ward." Elias froze. Mara's face went pale. "That's not him." The intercom hissed again, and the voice spoke slowly, distorted each word, dripping with something wet. "You brought the light back. We see you now." The floodlights overhead flickered once, just once, but that was enough. The creatures surged forward again, faster than before, screaming. Mara fired until her gun clicked empty. One of the creatures leapt onto her claws, tearing into her shoulder. Elias grabbed a wrench from the console and smashed it against the thing's head. It fell twitching, then crumbled into dust. He pulled Mara up. Blood soaked her sleeve, but she nodded weakly. "We need to reach the control panel upstairs. It's the only way to overload the power. Burn them all out." They ran through the corridors, the floor trembling as the creatures slammed against the walls behind them. Every bulb they passed flickered violently. The dark was chasing them, devouring the light in its path. By the time they reached the control room, Mara was barely standing. Elias sat her against the wall. Her eyes were unfocused, her breath shallow. "Finish it," she whispered. "Don't let it spread." He hesitated, then kissed her forehead. "I won't." He turned to the console, fingers flying over the switches. The system's warning lights flared red. Power surge imminent. Manual override required. From the speakers, the false Jonas voice returned louder this time. "You can't kill the dark, Elias. You are the dark." He ignored it and slammed the final lever down. The generators screamed. The floor shook. Light burst from every corner of the station, flooding the night in blinding brilliance. The creatures shrieked, dissolving like ash in the wind. Their screams filled the comms, the vents, the world itself, then silence. When the light dimmed, the station was still. The snow outside glowed faintly in the aftermath, untouched, endless. Mara was gone. So was the dark. Elias stood alone in the wreckage, breathing the sterile air. The control panel still hummed under his hand. Somewhere deep beneath the floor, the generators purred steadily, their rhythm like a heartbeat. He stepped to the window. Dawn hadn't come. The sky was still black, but for the first time, the darkness didn't feel alive. He whispered to himself, "Keep the lights on." And in the glass reflection for just a moment, a pale figure smiled back at him. The power surge left the air tasting of metal and ozone. Every light in the outpost blazed so bright it turned the snow outside into molten glass. Then, one by one, the bulbs dimmed back to a trembling glow, flickering like dying stars. Elias stood at the window, sweat cooling on his skin, the hum of the generator echoing through his bones. He waited for movement in the dark, for claws against metal, for a whisper. But there was only silence. The control room looked like a ruin, burnt circuits, cracked screens, a smell of smoke and blood. He turned toward the corner where Mara had fallen. Her coat lay empty, half buried in frost that had crept through the floor seams. No body. No trace of her warmth, just the faint outline of where she had been. He tried the radio again. "Base command. This is Station Echo 9. Come in." Static. Then, faintly, under the hiss breathing. Slow, ragged, wet. Elias's chest tightened. He turned the dial, voice trembling. "If anyone's out there, please respond." Another sound answered, a low hum, rhythmic, familiar. The generators. Only there was another tone beneath it, whispering. The same words he'd heard since the night Jonas vanished. "The light remembers." He staggered back from the console, heart pounding. The reflection in the black glass showed movement behind him. He turned sharply. Nothing. Only the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Hours passed. Or maybe it was minutes. Time no longer existed here. He wandered the corridors of the outpost like a ghost, checking every room, every corner. The metal walls groaned and expanded as if the building itself were breathing. The longer he stayed, the more the silence began to sound like speech. When he finally reached the generator bay again, the floor was slick with melted frost. The turbines still spun steady and strong, but the sound was wrong now, too deep, too organic. Elias crouched to inspect the wiring, and his reflection in the polished metal looked back at him. Only it wasn't moving the same way he was. The reflection smiled. He stumbled back, breath freezing in his throat. His shadow on the wall stretched longer than it should have, bending, twisting, breaking into unnatural angles. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "You're gone. I killed you." The air grew heavy. The lights dimmed. A voice rose from the shadows, his own distorted. "You didn't kill us, Elias. You fed us." He ran for the stairs. His boots echoed up the metal steps, his flashlight swinging wildly. The words followed him like a heartbeat. "Fed us. Fed us. Fed us." At the top of the stairs, he reached the airlock door. His hands shook as he tried the handle. It was frozen solid. He hit it again and again until his palms split, blood streaking the steel. The lights above him flickered once, twice, and went out. In the pitch black, the whisper returned closer now inside his head. "You kept the lights on, Elias. You kept us alive." He dropped to his knees, screaming into the void. The walls shook, the generator roared, and the last bulb overhead exploded in a shower of sparks. For a heartbeat, the world was pure light, then silence. When his eyes opened again, he wasn't sure how long had passed. The station was still glowing, every light humming steadily. The darkness outside had thinned to a gray mist. Elias stood trembling and looked out the window. The horizon burned with faint orange sunrise. The first light of the polar dawn. It should have been salvation. But in the reflection of the glass behind his own weary face stood hundreds of pale figures watching motionless. As the sun climbed higher, their forms began to fade into the light one by one. All except one. His own reflection smiled again. When the rescue helicopter found the station 3 weeks later, it was empty. No bodies, no blood. Every light was still on, humming steadily, though no power source remained connected. The report filed by the recovery team mentioned one last detail. On the control console, written in frost, were the words, "The light remembers." If you ever find yourself alone in the dark, remember this story before you reach for the light switch. Because some things don't hide from the darkness. They hide in the light. Please share if you've ever felt watched when the lights flicker. Subscribe if you believe some ghost stories aren't fiction. They're warnings.